Hey everyone, welcome to my first live stream ever. This is the Indian Realist here, and yeah, like I am extremely thankful for like all the support that I've got. Hello, I'm extremely thankful for all the support that I've got, especially like taking me all the way till 5K subscribers. Like I really didn't see that happening. Like I thought it's gonna take a long time, like 6 months or something, for me to get here, and then yeah, I'm here. Like if it happened within 3 months, so it was a great first attempt for me. I never expected to get here this fast, and yeah, thank you so much. So, as I said, today I will be doing a face reveal and showing what I really look like. So here I am, and apart from that, I'm ready. Like I'm doing an Ask Me Anything today, so you guys can let me know any questions that you have in the chat. I will be answering all the questions, and I'll be glad to like be with you today. I am not an engineer, nor am I an MBA. I'm actually a lawyer. So I graduated in law, and I am not practicing, but I am a lawyer. And yeah, like this journey started with my, let's say, interaction with law, and then understanding how law works in India. And based on that, I was like, okay, I need to do something about, let's say, making people aware of how laws work in the country. So that's where I started this channel, and then politics and the rest of the things are like things that I'm generally interested in, that I've been following all my life. So yes, like that also was something that I was like, okay, this channel needs to get into that. So yeah, uh, my background is basically law. Any other questions, guys? Like you can ask me anything. I'm here to answer like any questions, or if not, like let's start a watch party. I'll probably watch one or like a few videos of like top YouTubers, and then like I'll start reacting to those channels. And we can have this Ask Me Anything continue as it goes on. I'll be taking questions throughout like the chat. So the first question is, what was my motivation behind starting this channel? Um, so like I used to watch a lot of YouTube, and then I still watch a lot of YouTube, and basically I watch a lot of international YouTube. I don't like focus a lot on Indian YouTube, and what I felt with Indian YouTube is there is a need for a lot of people who are talking about, let's say, current events in a certain manner that no other channel is doing, like analysis and let's say covering a lot of pertinent questions in like a realistic manner. And I have basically worked with a lot of ministers. I worked in the Niti Aayog, so I do have a lot of experience when it comes to policy. So I was like, let me take my experience, and instead of actually going and working for a consultancy company, or instead of working in an NGO, I was like, let's start analyzing policy within India, how policy works, how data is structured, like how data is managed within India, and what to do with that. So that's why I started, let's say, a channel. And as I got into it, I kind of realized that I'm interested in culture as well. So like I started making videos on that, and yeah, I mean it's been doing well. So I'm really happy with that. Is an MBA relevant? Is the market? Okay, so it depends on where you are getting your MBA from. Let's say you are getting your MBA from an IIM, or a very top, well-placed university within India. Then yes, there is a market for it, because like a lot of people are looking, like a lot of companies are looking for MBAs to hire. But then it again depends very much on where you're getting hired from. And what do you say is right. Like there is a lot of glutton MBAs. Like there are a lot of people who are doing MBAs. So the earlier pipeline was a lot of engineers, after not getting a job in engineering, probably will do an MBA. But now there's even a trend where law students are also doing MBAs. So it's like it's become a trend within, like where it's either like UPSC or MBA. That's like your golden ticket within the country, and it's either one. Like either one is gonna get you somewhere. The next question that we have is, what kind of content do I wish to create on this channel? Uh, I want to create content that is, let's say, eye-opening, that most Indians are not really considering or talking about, and it's very interesting to like do research and then find out things that you generally thought, okay, this was accepted, but that's not really true. But then it's very difficult to conduct the research. Like the data transparency within India is very pathetic. So I'm talking about this from my experience, right? Like I have worked at Niti Aayog itself. Like Niti Aayog is the premier policy institution within the country, and that is where, you are supposed to have a lot of data, and like, data related to everything. There is the DMEEO, a department which is supposed to be measuring how every single scheme is working, and how many like, let's say, uh, people have benefited from those schemes, who are the beneficiaries. They are supposed to have every single data. But what necessarily is happening is that that's not true. Like most of the data is never there. And let's say, even if there is data, right? So for example, let's say there is the Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture is supposed to have data on how many seeds are being dispersed to the farmers, where these seeds are being dispersed, and how these seeds are being dispersed. But what is necessarily happening is they don't have the data, because the panchayats where, let's say, the data is supposed to be uploaded don't necessarily do it, or they don't do it unless and until they're like, let's say, pressed by hires within their own department to do it. But let's say you are in some other department and you are trying to identify how this, like, let's say, scheme is being dispersed. You generally don't get any data, and then because there is a lot of red tape, for example, what necessarily ends up happening is you have to, like, let's say, call one person up. Then this person tells you, okay, you need to wait like 7 days, or you need to get me someone higher from your department to call someone higher from my department in order for this to information to be transferred. So what necessarily ends up happening is, most of the time, like like, let's say, the government itself has so many different ministries, right? And most ministries are undertaking, let's say, actions and activities in different sectors and different streams. And in order for you to have a conclusive image of how things are and what's happening really in the country, you need to be able to see a bigger picture. But this bigger picture is very difficult to see. And then, even if we take, let's say, population data, I made a video on population in India. Getting data for that was extremely difficult, because there has been no census, like, since 2011, and now we are in 2024. So that's literally such a long time for, like, a country not to have a census. Is that it's very difficult to undertake any analysis in such a situation. um Someone, like, okay, professional supervisory is asking me whether I'm a liberal. I am not a liberal. I don't conform to any political team as such. I look at politics from a very different angle. For me, what is important is that the country develops. Like, it doesn't matter who is developing the country. Like, it's high time somebody did it. And if I am to, like, let's say, confine myself to a certain box, then I will say I am someone who supports young people in politics, and young people taking actual action where it counts. And that is, I think, what is more important. Like, in this country, it's very difficult for young people to even get anywhere in that matter. Like, nobody is listening to what, like, let's say, young people are saying, or what young people want. But this is a very young country. Like, most of the average age of the nation is now 28, but the average age of the people who are running the country is 64. So I think there is such a generational divide that most people don't even understand. And then the idea of being liberal or being right wing is very convoluted within India. Like, if you go outside India, right, like, say, internationally, the what is left wing and what is right wing is clearly defined. In India, the definition does not exist. Like, in the sense, the definition of, like, let's say, right wing within India is itself very superfluous, right? Because the because a right wing government is always someone who insists on a smaller government. But in India, what necessarily happens is you don't see this. There is no right wing aspects within India. The governments are huge, right? Like, the governments are so huge, and the no government. Like, for example, Donald Trump is talking about Department of Governmental Efficiency, where he is going to, let's say, look at all government departments and find out, okay, these are, like, governments that are, working effectively, departments that are necessary, and then cut off departments that are not necessary. For example, Javier Milei and what he did in Argentina. He campaigned on the fact that he is going to, let's say, cut off a lot of a lot of departmental waste and like a lot of glut within the government. And then he won the election in Argentina, and his turnaround in Argentina is based on that. But in India, that's not necessarily true. Like the Modi government, even though they say they are right wing, fundamentally, like what happens is like they are always going to go with policies that are going to expand the government. Is like create new ministries, create, let's say, new projects, create new special purpose vehicles. Most of it is always expanding the power of government. Like the government of India has always been fixated on this fact that okay, this is how we are going to expand government. So there is no aspect of right wing there. And then even if we look at how we are going to, let's say, challenge inflation and the government's involvement within industries. So right wing governments are generally characterized by the fact that they don't want to involve themselves too much within the market. So Adam Smith, in his like Wealth of Nations, he describes a government which is completely, let's say, not completely, but rather than like being completely involved in the market, where you are like, okay, I am going to require licenses for everything. You need to get licenses for everything, even if you're going to do that, even if you're going to do this. There is environmental regulations, there is, let's say, business regulations. So there's a lot of regulations that businesses have to even like undertake and complete in the first place for them to even get a good even step into the market. So this is very anti-capitalistic in that sense. So when you look at right wing within India, and then if you try to find out, okay, are these guys capitalistic, are these guys truly capitalistic? No, they're not. They're very socialistic even when they say that they are right wing. So if you are going to be like, okay, should you put yourself in a box, whether you're a liberal, whether you're right wing? Like it's very difficult when everyone is doing the same, that is expanding government and coming up with socialist freebie policies that have to be distributed to the people, because then that allows them to put more money in their pockets. So based on like, okay, I have worked with a few ministers. Like I can't name them because of a lot of NDAs that I've signed, but then I can tell you this, right? Even when a minister is working on something, even when a scheme is being rationalized, it's very difficult for that scheme to, like, let's say, catch effect in the fact that okay, like the people who are going to be implementing the scheme, the industrial people who are going to, let's say, provide the necessary resources for the scheme, are decided before like the scheme is actually bought into paper. So it's all like it's a big club, right? Like where these guys are like, okay, this is how they're going to profit off of something that they say that they're not going to profit off of. And that's how necessarily it always happens. I don't have a team. Like right now, I'm working alone because because I genuinely don't have money to pay people. So like I don't believe in like making people work for free. So even though like a lot of people actually mailed me and then asked me if if they could be a part of the process and join me in like this whole like endeavor that I'm doing, but I was genuinely of the opinion that okay, unless and until I can pay people for their work, I should not hire someone. And I can do that after, let's say, I make some money, and then that's when I'll probably focus on building a team. What would my next video be on? Okay, so for the next video, I'm working on a very interesting one. I'm kind of looking into whether what kind of government actually exists in India, and then what is actually portrayed in the media. So I think it's going to be an interesting video, and then like I hope everyone gives the same support that I've been getting like till now. You guys can ask me anything, and then I am more than willing to answer all the questions that you have for me. Or we can also start a watch party, like probably like I'll pick up one of the popular videos on finance or economics in India, and then we can also react to that. If you guys have any recommendations on what you like really want me to like talk about, you can like actually send a link of that even in the chat. I will take a look at it, and then we will like talk about it. I mean, if not, like, let's say, I do have a few videos in mind which I would actually want to like react to and then see and then like talk about those. So if you don't mind, like let's start that, and then as soon as you have questions, I will like take them in like whenever like say let's say there are a lot of questions, and then I'll start taking those questions then. So give me a minute now.
Hi. 42 lakhs per.
Okay. So this is like one video which I recently saw and I felt like, okay, this I have to react to because I kind of have talked about the topic of like why the Indian dollar is collapsing and then the reasons behind it. And then I felt like a lot of misinformation was in this video. And yeah, I will talk about my school life after this video. Like let's start with how did I come up with the idea of this channel? What's the story? So I am basically a graduate in law, and then I spent 5 years of my life, grand 5 years of my life, uh, understanding the law that runs this nation and how this country has been structured, what goes behind every single law that's been made, how elections happen. So yeah, all of that. And then during all of that, what I kind of realized is okay, the kind of image that we have built for India is very different from what it actually is on paper. While I was studying law, one of the main things that I was focused on was internship. So like in my college, we are necessarily required to do a lot of internships, and I my first few internships were in law firms, and that's when I realized, okay, this is not where I want to work in because I don't want to profit off of people's tragedies and people's problems. So I kind of felt like, okay, going in a different direction, and the direction that I saw was policy. So like in law you can also go into policy, so that's where I started going into policy. I started working in NGOs. So like my first like policy experience was working in NGOs. I worked with Akshay Patra, and then I also worked with like a public affairs center, which is an NGO in Bangalore. And then while I was working with these NGOs, I also got a lot of opportunities to work on like major policy operations. While I was at PAC, I worked on creating an SDG index. So the SDG index is based on the Sustainable Development Goals. And based on this experience, I further got an opportunity to work at Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog is like the premier institution of the policy institution of the country. And while I was working at Niti Aayog, I also got a chance to work with the Deputy Secretary to the Government of India. So I was working directly under the Deputy Secretary. So I had a lot of access to policy, a lot of access to let's say performance of policy. And while I was doing all of this, I kind of realized, okay, this is my calling. This is what I want to do. And as soon as I graduated, I started looking for a lot of jobs in consultancies and NGOs. And while I was doing this, I kind of realized, okay, these guys really didn't want you to do a master's when when I actually have a double degree. But then the pay was they're like, okay, you need to do so much work now. Yeah, I know, right? Like that is supposed to be a really good resume, but then when you actually go to work, they're like, okay, we will pay you 10K to 15K. And I was like, okay, bro, like this is the kind of experience that I'm bringing, and this is the like amount of, let's say, like knowledge that I have. Not only do I have knowledge in policy, like let's say running like softwares like Stata, running running, even like let's say running sheets, processing data, analyzing data, coming up with solutions, and a lot of critical thinking that actually goes on in there. And you require me to do a lot of work that actually involves all of that. But then at the end of the day, because like let's say you don't have a PhD or something, you only get paid like 20, 25K. And living in a metro, for example, like that salary is basically unsurvivable one. So if you are getting 20K and if you're spending like let's say 12K to 14K on rent, it doesn't make any sense. So that's when I was like, okay, there are a lot of problems. And then I feel like I had the opportunity and the ability to talk about this. And that's why I was like, okay, let's start getting into policy, and then let's start doing that on YouTube, because YouTube is the best place where you can reach people, where you can talk directly to the people and you can get an audience for that. And that's when I felt like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I started doing it. And then genuinely did not expect this amount of support, and the fact that the channel is going to grow this fast in like so much. So it was insanely like I don't know, it was insanely surprising. And I am extremely grateful for all the support that you guys have been giving me. It's been amazing. And I truly want the channel to grow bigger and then create a community of like-minded people where, it's not about looking at how things are being painted. It's not about looking at the propaganda that's been issued by either sides on the country, but actually looking at cold hard data and being like, okay, this is what needs to be done and this is what needs to happen. So that's my main inspiration on starting this channel. It was a shot in the dark, and then genuinely it was like really fun. And I really hope everyone connects with me on this journey. So yeah, now before we do anything, let me start, like let's start watching something. And thank you so much. Like I genuinely did not expect it, and I'm really thankful for all the support. Thank you, Vijay, for like being with the channel and then supporting this channel. I truly appreciate it, and I am thankful for all of you. And yeah, let's start talking about something, and then we'll take in questions as they come.
per annum.
Wow, 42 lakhs, that's your salary?
Yes.
And what do you do?
I'm an AI tools and
I
chat
mean, guys,
GPT
like
expert.
this is like
Alright, and what
obviously
degree
very
did you pursue
fake.
to
You
become that?
can't get that
Well,
much salary
honestly,
by
I didn't need
doing
to do
AI
any
tools
degree for it.
whatever.
What?
Nor did I spend lakhs.
किसी भी सेक्टर में देखो तो दुनिया भर की सबसे बड़ी से बड़ी कंपनीज अमेरिकन कंपनीज होती हैं। दुनिया भर की
If you also want to learn these AI powered
My God,
Excel
they're
skills,
throwing us
then I
ads
invite you
one
to
after
my
another.
3-hour AI in Microsoft Excel workshop.
इज डाइंग। जोक नहीं है, सच है। जल्द ही $1 की कीमत 100 रुपीज हो सकती है। रूपी इज फॉलिंग, रूपी सस्ता हो रहा है और डॉलर महंगा।
The Indian rupee hits a record low of 84.7 against the US dollar.
The Indian rupee hit an all-time low against the US dollar.
Rupee is on a free fall against the mighty dollar.
Again, I did talk about this
The
on
withdrawals from foreign
on the video
investors
that I made
have
as
hit
well.
the currency, leaving the
And,
Indian rupee weaker and the
It's,
US dollar
to be
stronger.
honest, I think the rupee is actually going to
आरबीआई
fall
इस
even
प्रॉब्लम
lower.
को
Like,
एक झटके में सॉल्व कर सकती है। $1 को
We've not
₹1
seen the
भी
last
बना
of
सकती
this.
है। ये 100% पॉसिबल है। लेकिन क्या हमें ये करना चाहिए? क्या ये हमारे फायदे में होगा या इससे हमारा नुकसान ही होगा? चलिए समझते हैं कि रूपी की गिरते हुए प्राइस को संवारने के लिए भारत को क्या करना चाहिए। सिर्फ नेगेटिव बातों पर वीडियोस बनाकर व्यूज बटोरना हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव नहीं है। इसीलिए हर वीडियो के एंड में हम सॉल्यूशन भी डिस्कस करते हैं। अगर
I truly want to see what solution they come up with, because this is not like one fixed solution that okay, you can have like this solution and it's gonna fix everything. Because first of all, like the basis for why the rupee is falling is simply on the fact that there is a lot of deficit within the country right now, is that we are importing a lot more than we are exporting. So that's the fundamental problem. So in order for this solution to be fixed, what you actually need is for like a manufacturing hub to be built within India. Is The main problem within the country is that we kind of had to skip steps. We skipped the whole industrial economy part and kind of went directly into the service economy. And all the problems that we have right now is kind of because of that. Is because like we do not have a manufacturing base and like Sida went to a service based industry where we are like, okay, we are going to provide services to people, but we don't have a manufacturing base. And the manufacturing base is necessarily what brings in the dollar to your country, and that's not necessarily happening, and that's why reserves are being depleted like very fast. And as reserves get depleted, the value of the currency falls against the dollar. And in order like to see a counter example to this, we can look at Indonesia, right? Indonesia was a country which was actually very poor till very recently, and then their first drives toward development was the creation of an industrial economy. And since then, what we have seen is let's leave China alone, right? China is on a completely different level than India. Indonesia has pretty much caught up to India, and we are now competing with not just let's say China, but we are also competing with Bangladesh and Indonesia in manufacturing, and that's where we are at right now.
अगर आप भी एक सोल्यूशन ओरिएंटेड माइंडसेट से भारत की ओर देखना चाहते हैं तो प्लीज उस सब्सक्राइब बटन पर क्लिक कर दीजिए, आप होना चाहिए। और तीसरा, फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स डॉलर्स में ही है, सब्सक्राइब बटन पर क्लिक कर दीजिए। ये आपके लिए तो फ्री है, लेकिन इससे हमारी बहुत हेल्प होती है। चैप्टर 1, मागा का इम्पैक्ट। डॉलर महंगा क्यों हो रहा है? कॉम्प्लेक्स सवालों के जवाब अक्सर आसान होते हैं। डॉलर महंगा हो रहा है क्योंकि लोगों को डॉलर चाहिए, दैट्स इट। ये चार्ट देखिए, 54% एक्सपोर्ट इनवॉइसिंग डॉलर में होती है, 58% ग्लोबल फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स डॉलर्स में ही है, 88% फॉरेन ट्रेड ट्रांजैक्शंस में डॉलर।
So this is because of the, let's say, setup that we have. Like after the World War, the US economy and the US dollar basically became fundamental to the global economy because the US dollar was decided upon as the global reserve currency. So in the Bretton Woods conference, 1 ounce of gold was set at the exchange value for 33 ounces. Sorry, $1 was set at around 30 ounces of gold, and that was the exchange rate value of the dollar, and it was tied to the value of gold. And in 1970 was when, based on the pressures of a lot of countries that were accusing US of being like, okay, you guys are printing a lot of dollars and we want our gold back. That was when France was one of the biggest countries that put a lot of pressure on the US. That was when Richard Nixon was like, okay, we are going to remove the gold standard completely, and what we are going to instead have is the floating standard. So the floating standard created something called as the what we now know as fiat currency. Fiat currency is when the money that you have is not really tied to anything. It's free floating. So what necessarily happens with fiat currency is, since it's not tied to anything of value, for example, let's say if it's tied to gold, then your country needs to have this amount of gold in order for them to like print the next, let's say, surge of a currency. But that does not happen now. In fiat currency, what basically happens is they can print as much money as they want, and that money printing now is actually based on debt. So the more debt you have, the more currency that you can print, and debt is in turn like directly connected to currency.
इस्तेमाल होता है। डॉलर महंगा होता है क्योंकि डॉलर की डिमांड बढ़ती है, और डॉलर की डिमांड बढ़ने का सबसे बड़ा रीजन है डोनाल्ड ट्रंप। जब से डोनाल्ड ट्रंप जीते हैं तब से डॉलर के प्राइसेस बढ़े हैं। क्यों? मागा की वजह से, मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन। इस पॉलिसी की वजह से सिर्फ रुपी ही नहीं, कई सारी करेंसीज पर इंपैक्ट हुआ है। ट्रंप चाहते हैं कि अमेरिका में इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़े, इनकम टैक्स कम हो और फॉरेन वर्कर्स को नहीं, लोकल्स को जॉब्स मिले। ट्रंप चाहते हैं कि दुनिया भर के इन्वेस्टर्स अमेरिका में आए, अमेरिका में पैसे लगाएं और अमेरिकन प्रोडक्ट्स खरीदें, जिससे
So this is basically based on the fact that during the whole globalization movement, what basically happened was, in America there is an area called the RAS Belt of America, and that's the states of Philadelphia. Then you have Ohio. You have a lot of these states where manufacturing within America was centered. So all of the manufacture that used to happen in America did not happen at the coast. So you have the West Coast and the East Coast. The East Coast is New York and the West Coast is California. So California was where like the whole service-based tech industry boom happened. And the East Coast is where like the country is governed. New York, then you have Washington, and all of these like states and like cities are based in the East Coast. So what happened in Middle America was basically or when all of these manufacturing jobs were outsourced to China, and then all of these jobs were moved to China, all of the factories within these states went completely silent, and there was no manufacturing that was happening in these states. So because of that, a lot of the workers within these states basically had to move out of the area. So a lot of them ended up emigrating to either the East Coast or the West Coast. And then the ones who were left there in absolute poverty, like the ones who are known as hillbillies, or the Rust Belt Americans. So these people are mainly the ones who used to work within these manufacturing plants, like the Ford manufacturing plants, and a lot of manufacturing that used to happen within America used to happen in this area. And no, like what basically happened later on was, is since these guys did not have any wealth, right? Like, and then because all the jobs in the area left to China, they ended up being impoverished on like an epic scale. And no politician was actually listening to them. No, like neither side, like neither the Republicans nor the Democrats were actually pandering to these people and these communities. What Trump did was, he came, he saw that there is a problem here, and that's what he's trying to do. So his main goal, by like let's say even imposing tariffs, is to not start a tariff war, but actually like to bring all these jobs back to America and bring manufacturing back to America. So what he's trying to do is, even for American companies, what he's trying to do is, he's trying to make manufacturing in America very difficult, like manufacturing in America very easy, and manufacturing abroad by outsourcing very difficult. So his plan is to move all the jobs back to America so that people in America can have jobs. And MAGA is basically built on that. The core base of MAGA is all of these people from Middle America, the ones who have been like let's say neglected for years by either of the parties. Trump is the one who saw them as a like as a voting opportunity, like voting bank, and then capitalized on that opportunity. And then like we can see that success now, right? Like they got him into office twice now already, and this time he is pretty sure on the fact that okay, he needs to do something for them, and this is his way of doing it. And contrary to them saying that okay, like it's just the demand for the dollar that has increased, and therefore the price of dollars have increased, is not just that, is that all over the world, the basic fact of the economy now is there is uncontrolled printing, and people have started realizing that. So the only like opportunity for people to like let's say like make money is now by investing it in dollars, and that's the only option that they have. That's what like has been left. So that's why what we are now seeing is the situation where like the dollar is the only thing that people are ready to invest in, or people are even investing in. And it's the value of the dollar has been going up, and consequently the manufacturing within India, exporting within India has completely collapsed. So even when you have a lot of companies in India, like a lot of companies that actually are like India based and are for Indians and are catering towards Indians, they are not actually focusing on manufacturing. What they are basically doing is they are white labeling products. So what they do is they manufacture products in China, or they get products that are manufactured in China, apply a new brand label, and then they sell it to Indians. So they are buying wholesale from China and selling it to people here in India. So that's what's happening. So manufacturing within India is not really growing, even though there are a few, like let's say, even though you can see that there is growth in Indian companies, or the number of companies in India being incorporated. Manufacturing is not increasing, and that's mainly the problem as to why the Indian dollar is collapsing against the dollar. So even though the value of the dollar is increasing, we can see countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Switzerland, all of these countries are not necessarily having this crisis where their currency is crashing. But India specifically has that currency because the rising dollar kind of exposes the weaknesses of the Indian economy.
अमेरिका में जॉब्स बढ़ें, अमेरिका की इकोनॉमी बेहतर हो और अमेरिकन ट्रेड बढ़े। साथ ही साथ वो चाइना से आने वाले प्रोडक्ट्स पर बहुत हाई टैरिफ्स लगाने वाले हैं, और वो भी कितना पता है, 60% से लेकर 100% तक।
The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
यहाँ फोकस उनकी लास्ट बात पर कीजिए, कंपनीज अमेरिका में आएंगी। मागा की वजह से
See what I said,
इन्वेस्टर्स
right?
का कॉन्फिडेंस अमेरिका में बढ़ेगा या नहीं पता नहीं, लेकिन बाकी देशों में कम जरूर होगा। आप ही सोचिए, अगर वो अमेरिका में फैक्ट्री लगा सकते हैं तो बाकी किसी देश में फैक्ट्री क्यों लगाएंगे? चलिए डेटा देखते हैं। किसी भी सेक्टर में देखो तो दुनिया भर की सबसे बड़ी से बड़ी कंपनीज अमेरिकन कंपनीज होती हैं। दुनिया भर की 44% रिचेस्ट फाइनेंस कंपनीज अमेरिकन है। दुनिया भर की 65% रिचेस्ट हेल्थ केयर कंपनीज अमेरिकन है। दुनिया भर की 73% टेक कंपनीज अमेरिकन है। अमेरिकन कंपनीज की स्टॉक मार्केट कैप दुनिया भर में आधे से भी ज्यादा है। अमेरिका डोमिनेट्स द वर्ल्ड, ये एक सच्चाई है और ट्रंप इस डोमिनेंस को और भी बढ़ाना चाहते हैं। वो खुद एक बिजनेसमैन पहले हैं और पॉलिटिशियन बाद में, तो
He is more of a politician and an entertainer than a businessman. Trump used to actually have a show where, this show ran for, I think, 13 seasons in the US. And he is more of an entertainer than you can say he's a politician or a businessman. And he kind of understands that. So, with the advent of Trump in politics, you see this new meme based politics. He understands memes, he understands podcasts. And that's what makes him a very different and a very unique leader when compared to the rest of the world. And he is the indication of a new era of where this is where politics is actually going to head.
वो समझते हैं कि जीतने के दो तरीके होते हैं। एक, खुद पावरफुल बनो जो वो ऑलरेडी हैं, और दूसरा कि बाकी के देशों को पावरफुल बनने से रोको जो वो करेंगे। एंड दैट्स द रीजन व्हाई इन्वेस्टर्स चाइना से पैसे निकालकर अमेरिका में इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं। यूरोप
So, like, more than it being an aim at weakening certain companies, it's more about strengthening manufacturing within India because that's what his main voter base wants him to do. So, if like American imperialism is very true, and American imperialism has existed in the world for a very long time. But that American imperialism was not oriented towards, let's say, taking away manufacturing from the rest of the countries. That American imperialism was based on subverting countries and then, like, let's say, destabilizing governments within other countries, like they did in Chile, like they did in a lot of countries in South America. Why the way that they did it in Vietnam and a lot of even in Ukraine for that matter. Like in 2010, the CIA basically instituted a political coup in the Ukraine before Zelensky came into power. So that's how where they've been doing it. So this dollar like based economy where they're going to bring manufacturing back based on, let's say, increasing manufacturing within the country is not aimed at, let's say, weakening other countries, because for weakening other countries, the American move and the American game plan is very different.
यूरोप से पैसे निकालकर अमेरिका में इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं। इसी तरह से इनकम टैक्स कम करने से और H1B वीजास कम करने की वजह से लोकल पॉपुलेशन को अमेरिका में कॉन्फिडेंस बढ़ रहा है। ये अमेरिका के लिए गुड न्यूज जरूर है, लेकिन पूरी दुनिया के लिए है बैड न्यूज, क्योंकि इससे US डॉलर तो स्ट्रांग होता है, लेकिन बाकी के देशों की करेंसी वीक हो जाती है।
I don't think so. He did a very good job in explaining why this necessarily means that the dollar is increasing, right? So all of these things are necessarily what Donald Trump is going to do. But the disconnect here is you also have to understand that Donald Trump cannot put on Indian brands manufacturing in India. He is only putting pressure on a lot of American companies that are manufacturing outside, like outside. So even if we look at that a lot, very few American companies even manufacture in India. Like let's say we can take Apple for that matter. And then Foxconn actually wanted to move one of their manufacturing plants to India. And even Samsung wanted to do it. But when Samsung wanted to do it, like what they realized is like, okay, the operational cost and the like time for setting up something in India is so big, is that they necessarily don't want to take those losses. And then they ended up establishing the same in Vietnam. And this is the problem, right? Like, yes, it's true that Trump wants to do all of this and this is what his game plan is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, this is like bad news for the rest of the world. Like, you can still benefit off of this. And the way that you can benefit off of this is by investing in, let's say, these companies that are going to move manufacturing or necessarily have the clearances to do so in America. But again, does it help development of companies within India? That's a very difficult question to answer, because if we look at it, a lot of these Indian companies like Adani, Ambani, also have a lot of contracts with America, and then they also have power sharing contracts with other countries in the world. So it's very difficult to say that, okay, this is exactly why the Indian dollar is weakening. But yes, it's true. Like in some ways, he is like true in what he says.
यूएस डॉलर एक करेंसी नहीं, एक वेपन है, जिसे हमने इस वीडियो में एक्सप्लेन किया है। क्योंकि डॉलर का इंपैक्ट ग्लोबल ट्रेड पर होता है, इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ता है, लो इनकम देशों पर असर होता है और अमेरिका और शक्तिशाली होता जाता है। ये सारी बातें हमने इस वीडियो में कवर की हैं। लेकिन एक करेंसी के वैल्यू डिसाइड कौन करता है? चैप्टर 2, द करेंसी मिथ। दुनिया में एक मिथ है कि अगर एक देश की करेंसी महंगी है तो वो देश स्ट्रांग है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, कुछ समय पहले हम काम से बहरेन में गए थे, जहां के दिनार की वैल्यू क्या है पता है? $2.6 या फिर 227 रुपीस पर दिनार। लेकिन मैप पे अगर मैं कहूं कि बहरेन को दिखाओ, तो आप में से 99% लोग दिखा भी नहीं पाएंगे। बहरेन यहाँ है, इतना छोटा है।
Tired of being a slave to your trading screen? Are you drowning in losses because of
बेंगलुरु के साइज का है। सिर्फ करेंसी महंगी होने से बहरेन अमेरिका से स्ट्रांग बनेगा क्या? डॉलर से महंगा होना आपकी करेंसी को महंगा बना सकता है, लेकिन आपके देश को स्ट्रांग नहीं बना सकता। और इसका इनवर्स भी सच है। डॉलर से
This is completely questionable. Bahrain's currency is extremely high because of the amount of gas fields that they have access to. So, because of the fact that their country is sitting on a lot of value, and the fact that not only that, they're also like kind of exporting it, right? So as you see, again, they're exporting a lot of gas, and that's why the value of their currency is very high. So they have a resource that they can capitalize on, extract and export. Therefore, their country is kind of, therefore their currency is comparatively is comparatively costlier than the Indian rupee. If you look at India in that sense, India is only sitting on a lot of human capital. But that human capital necessarily has to be applied somewhere for that to be, like, let's say, converted into any sort of value. Since that human capital is actually not being applied anywhere and is mostly being wasted, you don't like have that conversion of that human capital into value. But let's say if it's natural resources like Bahrain has, with the vast amount of gas fields that they have, which they kind of also share with Iran, and they also share it with, I think, Kuwait, that's the reason why they are not just sitting on value, but they're also exporting that value by extracting it. So therefore, their currency is much higher. And is such a currency stronger? Yes, absolutely. The currency is stronger because that enhances your buying power, right? Because that enhances your buying power, you can acquire dollars for comparatively lower cost than let's say India. And because you can acquire dollars for lower cost, you can trade at lower cost. So therefore, you can import at lower prices because your currency itself is very equivalent to the value of a dollar. Like 2.26 Bahrainian dinars versus $1 is a stronger conversion rate for them, which allows them to import at very low prices.
सस्ता होना आपकी करेंसी को सस्ता बना सकता है, लेकिन आपके देश को कमजोर नहीं बना सकता। कंडीशंस अप्लाइड। $1 खरीदने के लिए 157 जापानीज येन देने पड़ते हैं। $1 खरीदने के लिए 1400 कोरियन वॉन देने पड़ते हैं। $1 खरीदने के लिए 23,000 वियतनामीज डोंग देने पड़ते हैं। रूपी से कंपेयर करें तो आज की घड़ी में 86 रुपीज इज इक्वल टू $1 है। बट डज इट मीन कि जापान, कोरिया या वियतनाम भारत से गए गुजरे देश हैं? ऑन दी अदर हैंड, $1 खरीदने के लिए 68 अफगानी देने पड़ता है। इसका मतलब ये नहीं होता कि अफगानिस्तान भारत से स्ट्रॉन्गर इकोनॉमी है। इसे कहते हैं एक्सचेंज रेट मिसकंसेप्शन। एक एक्सचेंज रेट डिसाइड कैसे होता है? 3 मेन मेथड्स है जो ज्यादातर देश अपनाते हैं। एक है फिक्स्ड एक्सचेंज रेट, जो यूएई में यूज होता है। उनके सेंट्रल बैंक ने डिसाइड किया है कि $1 इज इक्वल टू 3.67 AED, यानी लगभग $1 खरीदने के लिए उनको 4 AED देने पड़ते हैं। ये उन्होंने पहले से फिक्स किया हुआ है। दूसरा है फ्लोटिंग एक्सचेंज रेट, जो जापान में यूज होता है, जहां सेंट्रल बैंक नहीं, मार्केट फोर्सेस यानी डिमांड और सप्लाई डिसाइड करता है कि एक्सचेंज रेट क्या होना चाहिए।
So why do you think the UAE even has the ability to set a rate? That is because they are exporting dollar, and that was based on the petrodollar agreement that they had. is that the petrodollar agreement is fundamentally based on the fact that the dollar derives value from oil exporting, and these oil exporting countries were given the first right in order to decide, okay, this is the rate at which they are going to set the exchange value with the dollar. And that is why they have that ability. It's not something where, a country can simply decide, okay, that we are now going to have fixed exchange rates, because that is going to then doom your economy. Floating exchange rates is the global norm, and if you don't have a floating exchange rate, then it means that your market cannot, let's say, rally against, or your market becomes inflexible against the dollar. And this is very dangerous for most countries. These petrodollar countries, these Middle Eastern countries can do it because they fundamentally have access to oil resources, and the fact that the petrodollar agreement, where the dollar was fixed to the value of these countries, because they are like now going to export dollar for in the stead of America. That was what happened, and that's why like the UAE even has the ability to like do that.
चाहिए। और तीसरा होता है मैनेज फ्लोटिंग एक्सचेंज रेट, जो पहले दो मेथड्स का कॉम्बिनेशन होता है। ये भारत में यूज होता है। यहाँ आरबीआई एक अपर लिमिट और एक लोअर लिमिट में एक्सचेंज रेट को मेंटेन करने की कोशिश करती है। रेट को ज्यादा गिरने नहीं देती और रेट को बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ने भी नहीं देती। अब डॉलर के प्राइसेस बढ़ रहे हैं तो आरबीआई अपने रिजर्व्स में से डॉलर्स बेचना स्टार्ट करेगी, ताकि मार्केट में डॉलर्स का सप्लाई बढ़े, या फिर इंटरेस्ट रेट्स कम करेगी, ताकि इन्वेस्टर्स के लिए इंडिया में इन्वेस्ट करना आसान हो जाए। वो रुपीस खरीदे या फिर रुपीस की डिमांड बढ़े। यानी आरबीआई रुपी की डिमांड बढ़ाने की कोशिश कर सकती है या फिर मार्केट में डॉलर का सप्लाई बढ़ाने की कोशिश कर सकती है।
Foreign exchange is very heavily regulated in India, and then most Indians don't even have access to all of these markets where they can speculate against the dollar or speculate against the rupee. So a lot of global currencies and a lot of global traders were actually doing this, and they do this like through offshore accounts, through island-based offshore accounts like the Cayman Islands and all of these. And what necessarily they were doing is they were betting against the rupee. And the RBI, in like during Shaktikanta Das's term, was like, okay, we need to scare off these speculators, because it kind of portrays the Indian rupee in a very bad image, that people are speculating against the Indian rupee. So they ended up like shorting the dollar basically. But taking a short position means that you are exposing yourself to a lot of risk, because in a short position, though the gains are limited, losses are unlimited. So therefore, this is a very bad move for the Indian RBI, because instead of, let's say, even changing interest rates, what they basically did was they themselves started betting against the dollar, and in order to scare away the people who are betting against the rupee, by just saying that, okay, if you are going to take such a stand, we are going to take a bigger stand against you by betting against the dollar. So therefore, your, like, let's say, risk increases. But that didn't end up materializing, and a lot of money was actually lost in that trade.
यहाँ कोशिश इस वर्ड को याद रखिए, उस पर वीडियो के एंड में आएंगे। चाइना का एग्जांपल लेते हैं। चाइना ने 2015 साल में जानबूझकर अपनी करेंसी 3% घटाई थी, क्योंकि चाइना चाहता था कि उनके प्रोडक्ट्स वेस्टर्न देशों के लिए सस्ते रहें, ताकि वो ज्यादा खरीदे और ट्रेडर्स को फायदा हो। करेंसी की वैल्यू जानबूझकर कम करने से उन्होंने ये अश्योर किया कि बाहर की कंपनीज चाइना में ही मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कंटिन्यू करें।
This stance is what the new governor of RBI wants to do, where he's like, okay, fine, instead of trying to actually control what's happening, what will necessarily do it is because they themselves don't know, like, okay, that this is what's happening or why this is happening. So they are also like, okay, fine, we'll have a floating currency, and then we'll let the dollar and the rupee stabilize automatically by not, let's say, manipulating
बढ़ते हुए
the
डॉलर
market.
का इंपैक्ट। पैसा गया है, पैसा तो पैरों की धूल है, सब मोह माया है। अब आप सोचेंगे कि हम तो ठहरे सिंपल लोग, ना ही हमें अमेरिका जाना है, ना ही हमें इंपोर्टेड चीजों का शौक है, तो डॉलर महंगा होने से हमें क्या फर्क पड़ता है? फर्क पड़ता है क्योंकि हम सब पेट्रोल तो खरीदते हैं ना, और वो भी कितना पता है? पिछले साल हमने 87% ऑयल इंपोर्ट किया था, जिसके लिए हमने $132 बिलियन खर्च किए। ये सारी पेमेंट हमें डॉलर में ही तो करनी पड़ती है, और इसका अल्टीमेट बर्डन आम जनता को ही
You can
झेलना
drop
पड़ता
any
है।
questions that you
मतलब
have
क्या?
about
एक
like
आसान
anything in
एग्जांपल
the
से
chat as
समझाता
well.
हूं।
I'll be
आज ऑयल
answering
के
it
एक बैरल की कीमत है
as we are reacting to the video. So you guys can ask me any questions that you have.
$73। अब ये बैरल खरीदने के लिए भारत को एक बार नहीं दो बार ट्रांजैक्शन करना पड़ता है। पहली बार रुपीस देकर डॉलर्स खरीदने पड़ते हैं और फिर डॉलर्स देकर ऑयल खरीदना पड़ता है। कुछ समय पहले हमें 80 रुपए देकर $1 मिल रहा था। उस कैलकुलेशन से देखें तो ऑयल का एक बैरल हमें 5840 रुपीस में मिल रहा था। अब डॉलर हो चुका है ऑलमोस्ट 86 रुपीस, तो हमें सेम ऑयल बैरल के लिए 6278 रुपीस देने पड़ रहे हैं। यानी हर बैरल के लिए हमें 438 रुपीस ज्यादा खर्च करने पड़ेंगे। क्या इंडियन कंपनीज ये सारा पैसा अपनी जेब से देंगी? क्या सरकार ऑयल पर टैक्स कम करेगा? घंटा इसका बिल।
This is not really true, right? Like, a lot of Indian companies are actually acquiring oil from Russia, and acquiring oil from Russia means you are actually acquiring oil at a much lower rate than what the global standard is set. So OPEC countries have a different rate that is set, and they set this rate in collaboration with the US, in discussions with the US. But the main problem is with OPEC countries as well. While buying oil from Russia, you don't have to spend that much. So the sanctions that were put on Russia basically means that Russia can't sell their oil at a global market price, and a lot of Indian companies are actually buying oil from Russia, and that means they are not necessarily paying the price that he quoted for like for each barrel in India. They're actually paying much lesser because they're acquiring the oil from US. Exactly. The cost at which we import oil is very less because we are also importing oil through ghost tankers from Russia.
पास ऑन होता जाएगा और आपको ही भरना पड़ेगा। सपोज अगर मुंबई का एक परिवार गाड़ी चलाने के लिए महीने के 3000 रुपए खर्च करता है, तो उतनी ही ड्राइविंग करने के लिए उन्हें 3200 रुपए खर्च करने होंगे। बेंगलुरु में कैब फेयर्स बढ़ेंगे, और अगर आप एक फ्लाइट लेकर कहीं घूमने गए तो जहां आप एक डोमेस्टिक फ्लाइट के लिए 5000 रुपए खर्च करते थे, वहीं 6000 रुपए आपको खर्च करने पड़ेंगे। इंडियंस की दोनों साइड से लगती है। एक साइड से हमारे पास ऑयल नहीं है और दूसरे साइड से डॉलर महंगा ही होता जा रहा है। बीच में इंडियन कंज्यूमर को निचोड़ा जा रहा है। लेकिन कुछ लोग ऐसे भी हैं जिनके पास खुद की गाड़ी या बाइक नहीं होती, वो वर्क फ्रॉम होम करते हैं। ऐसे लोगों का भी फ्यूल से रिश्ता है इन्फ्लेशन की वजह से। यू सी, आप गाड़ी चलाएं या ना चलाएं, जब एक सब्जी किसान के खेत से सब्जी मंडी तक आती है और
Again, inflation in India is not just high due to oil. For example, inflation is really high because of the deficits that the government has been running. The Indian government has been running massive deficits within the country. So if you look at the amount of percentage within the GDP where the deficits have increased, it's very high. And then when all of what necessarily happens with all of this inflation is that it can't be removed from the market because all of this inflation ends up within the housing market. So what this inflation necessarily means is it makes it very difficult for the next generation that is coming up to, let's say, own a home, to be part of the market, or to even achieve anything in that matter. Because when the housing market absorbs all the inflation, it necessarily means unless and until you have a housing market crash, the economy is not going to change, and it's going to be very difficult for young people to make it within the economy. So, like, because of the oil prices increasing, transportation costs for like goods may increase. But not just that, like a lot of companies are seeing the situation with high inflation and are also price gouging. So therefore, like the general value of products within the country or being able to afford anything for that matter has become very difficult. Oil is energy, and energy market could change from oil and gas to other sources in the next 20. Again, it's speculation, right? Like that is going to change in the next 20, 30 years. So let's say you're talking about renewables and renewables like solar or wind. The problem with renewables is they are not at the level where like it costs a lot more to like extract the same amount of energy from oil or from renewables than it costs for you to extract from gas. And the second thing is this is all based on like assumptions that you are making. It's like, okay, fine, renewables will take over the planet. But if we look at countries like Germany versus France, Germany spent, I think, a major part of their energy budget on renewables. And they not only did they spend it on renewables, they also ended up shutting down a lot of their nuclear all of their nuclear power plants. So they completely moved away from nuclear energy, and they moved away from their plan was to move away from non-renewable energy. But what necessarily ended up happening is, uh, when the whole Russian conflict started, they because, like, again, renewables cannot replace uh, oil or non-renewable energy at this point in time. So therefore, their the cost of, like, gas, because they're not getting it anymore from Russia, it kind of increased exponentially, and they're now stuck in a place where they have to pay this price in order for them to have access to energy. So renewables are not going to be replacing gas or oil for a very long time. Yes, like hydroelectricity is a huge contributor to renewable energy, but most of the countries are not investing on dams, and then dams have become very geopolitical. Dams raise a lot of geopolitical issues, so you don't see a lot of dams even being set up in most countries. So the one way where we can see things change is if everyone is switching to nuclear, and nuclear is probably going to be the best way forward. But within the next 20, 30 years, will things change? No, there is very little evidence to suggest that things are going to change or even move towards renewables.
और वहां से आपके घर, तो उस ट्रक में पेट्रोल या डीजल ही यूज होता है। यानी जैसे डॉलर एक्सपेंसिव होगा, वैसे तेल एक्सपेंसिव होगा, और आपके घर की सब्जी भी एक्सपेंसिव होगी। यानी जब डॉलर के प्राइसेस बढ़ते हैं तो हम इनडायरेक्टली इन्फ्लेशन को इंपोर्ट करते हैं, एंड दैट्स द प्रॉब्लम। बढ़ते डॉलर से जैसे एक आम इंसान को गुस्सा आता है, वैसे ही बिजनेसेस को भी गुस्सा आता है, क्योंकि उनका कर्जा बढ़ता है। सोचिए, अगर किसी इंडियन बिजनेस ने बाहर से इन्वेस्टमेंट कर्जे के तौर पर उठाई है और उस समय रेट चल रहा था 80 रुपीज इज इक्वल
Running out of oil is like a huge problem that we do face, and that's true. Like, within like a few lifetimes, we have to come up with new energy sources. And for me, what I basically think is nuclear is where we'll probably move on to than renewables. So nuclear is a much better option when compared to renewables, and we've had nuclear for a long time. And not just that, it's much more safer now because technology with nuclear has actually moved forward a lot, and then a lot of new nuclear plants are being designed, but nobody really wants to invest in them because I think one of the biggest problems is they can't charge as much as they charge for oil as well. Like, when nuclear takes hold, I think energy will become so much more cheaper that a lot of these companies, like, that are profiting off of oil will also not be able to profit anymore. So that the lobbying against nuclear is kind of very strong from all lobbies, like the renewable lobby, and as the renewable lobby as well as the oil lobby. So that's why nuclear is like so demonized, because once nuclear comes into power, you can't charge as much because nuclear produces a lot of power, and you can basically use that to power a lot of homes. And you can end up at a situation where if you're completely nuclear, you can actually start giving people power for free. Are renewables more sustainable? Absolutely not, because the carbon footprint in yeah, it is. It is. A lot of people don't want to talk against renewables, but there are a few documentaries that were made, and there are a lot of books that have been written on the fact that renewables are not necessarily as safe or as sustainable as they're made out to be. So, what is my experience in talking about this? I used to have an alternate. I used to work on alternate energy, and I used to have a startup when I was in my 11th grade, and I was very active within the startup industry. And then at that time, a lot of companies that were coming up were based on renewables. And if you look at it now, all of those startups are like closed, and they are not doing anything because the timeline that you have for renewables is itself very fraught with problems, right? Like, if you look at solar panels, the manufacturing of solar panels requires a lot of rare earth minerals, and all of these rare earth minerals have to be pulled out of the ground, and this itself is again destroying a lot of forests. And China is the only country that has the advantage to competitively manufacture solar panels. So no other country even has the ability to manufacture solar panels at the level of China, and that is because they are pulling out all of these resources from the ground, like iridium. They're also pulling out, I think, a lot of other like lithium, for example. And then the problem with also the problem with renewables is they're not continuous. So solar farms only work during the day. What happens at night? So like the amount of power that's been generated in a day needs to be stored in a battery. And again, it being stored in a battery necessarily means again you need to create new lithium ion battery structures to like store the energy that's been produced in the morning. But that's not true with thermal plants. Like thermal plants you can run whenever you're necessary, so it's continuous power when you need it. uh, what was the startup? The startup was based on renewable energy. It was based on like what we called like we were combining a fridge and an oven in one device, and we were not using CFCs or HFCs in like either cooling or heating. So what we were using like a small Peltier element, and that's based on thermodynamics to like shift the heat from one compartment to the other. So we built a fridge and oven in one device.
टू $1 आज रेट हो चुका है 86 रुपीज पर डॉलर, यानी कुछ 7.5% रेट बढ़ा है। तो उस बिजनेस के लिए लोन महंगा हो गया क्योंकि उसे लोन पर इंटरेस्ट तो चुकाना है ही, साथ ही साथ उसके इंटरेस्ट की किश्तों पर ये 7.5% भी ऐड हो चुका है। अब आप सोचेंगे कि इतने छोटे से अमाउंट से क्या फर्क पड़ता है, लेकिन फर्क पड़ता है क्योंकि इंडिया का एक्सटर्नल डेट है $682 बिलियन का, जिसमें ये 7.5% ऐड किए तो $5 बिलियन हमें ज्यादा पे करने पड़ेंगे। यानी गरीब से लेकर दौलतमंद तक सब पर अगर कोई चीज इंपैक्ट करती है तो वो है इंडियन रूपी और उसका डॉलर से कनेक्शन। लेकिन क्या किसी को भी इसकी परवाह है? पार्लियामेंट में हम 21वीं सदी में भी कास्ट को लेकर टाइम वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, जबकि मेन प्रॉब्लम्स हैं कि बिजनेसेस देश छोड़कर जा रहे हैं। पैंडेमिक के समय चाइना के अगेंस्ट लोगों का गुस्सा था, उसका फायदा थाईलैंड और वियतनाम ने लिया है, लेकिन हम नहीं ले पाए हैं। चाइना आज ऐसे पोजीशन पर है कि वो जानबूझकर अपनी करेंसी मैनिपुलेट करता है, अपने करेंसी की वैल्यू कम करता है ताकि वो ज्यादा एक्सपोर्ट कर पाए। लेकिन मुद्दा ये है कि हम हमेशा ट्रेड डेफिसिट में चलते हैं, हमारे पास एक्सपोर्ट करने के वर्ल्ड क्लास प्रोडक्ट्स हैं ही नहीं। हम नेल कटर से लेकर कंप्यूटर्स तक बाहर से इंपोर्ट करते हैं। प्रॉब्लम करेंसी नहीं है, प्रॉब्लम वैल्यू है। जब हमारे देश के पास दूसरे देशों को देने के लिए वैल्यू होगी, जब दुनिया भर में इंडियन प्रोडक्ट्स की डिमांड होगी, तो इंडियन रूपी की वैल्यू ऑटोमेटिकली बढ़ेगी और फिर धीरे धीरे मार्केट फोर्सेस की वजह से डॉलर सस्ता होगा। चैप्टर 4।
क्या आप वीडियो एडिटिंग सीख के इस तरह की डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज बनाना चाहते हो?
$1
Again, as I said, it's about creating something of value using the human capital that we have towards something effective. And unless and until we are not doing that, and increasing exports, it's not going to happen.
इज इक्वल टू 1 रुपी। वीडियो की शुरुआत में हमने कहा था कि आरबीआई इस प्रॉब्लम को एक झटके में सॉल्व कर सकती है। कैसे? 100 रुपीज में से 2 जीरोस हटाकर। इसे रीडिनोमिनेशन कहते हैं। टर्की ने 2005 में यही किया था, जब उन्होंने 1 मिलियन लीरा को 1 लीरा कहना स्टार्ट किया था। इनफैक्ट भारत में भी तो पैसा आना ऐसे छोटे छोटे
This is not a solution to the problem. This is just calling one thing another, and this doesn't really solve the problem that we have, right? Again, you can name it or call it whatever you want, but the problem still exists is the fact that like your country is not exporting anymore. So after that, you will again have the same problems. And then for that to happen, either you have to cut down inflation, how you have to take out a lot of money from circulation, like we saw with the demonetization exercise. You'll basically have to do all of that. And trust me, this country is not ready for an exercise like that again.
डिनोमिनेशंस हुआ करते थे। आज 25 पैसे का कॉइन भी नहीं है और 25 पैसे में आने वाली कोई चीज भी नहीं है। तो अगर कल जाकर आरबीआई डिक्लेयर करती है कि आज से 100 रुपीज इज इक्वल टू 1 सुपर रुपी, तो बात खत्म हो गया। $1 इज इक्वल टू 0.86 रुपी। लेकिन इससे आपके और मेरे प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व नहीं होंगे, क्योंकि प्रॉब्लम करेंसी एक्सचेंज रेट है ही नहीं। प्रॉब्लम है PPP यानी परचेजिंग पावर पैरिटी। ये एक इकोनॉमिक थियरी है जो मानकर चलती है कि ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम डिफरेंट देशों के आइडेंटिकल गुड्स की प्राइस सेम होनी चाहिए। एक बर्गर का एग्जांपल लेते हैं। एक बर्गर अगर आपको इंडिया में 50 रुपए में मिलता है और वही बर्गर $1 में यूएस में मिलता है तो 50 रुपीज इज इक्वल टू $1। ये रेट आइडियल है। लेकिन प्रॉब्लम यह है कि आज भारत में सैलरीज अमेरिका के मुकाबले 1/8 हैं और कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग अमेरिका के मुकाबले 1/4 है। यानी एक बर्गर जो अमेरिका में $8 का मिलता है वो इंडिया में 178 रुपीज में मिलता है। लेकिन इंडियन लोगों की इनकम हाई न होने की वजह से ये 178 रुपीज का बर्गर उन्हें अमेरिकन से ज्यादा महंगा लगता है। दैट इज द बिगर प्रॉब्लम। तो सॉल्यूशंस क्या है? 3 सॉल्यूशंस बताता हूं जिसमें से नंबर 3 जरूर सुनिए क्योंकि इसमें आपका भी कंट्रीब्यूशन होने वाला है। नंबर 1, रुपी की डिमांड बढ़ाओ। हमारा फोकस डॉलर की वैल्यू कम करना नहीं हो सकता क्योंकि ये हम कंट्रोल कर ही नहीं सकते। कुछ समय पहले मैंने कहा था कि आरबीआई रुपी की वैल्यू बढ़ाने की कोशिश कर सकती है। भारत में इन्वेस्ट करना फॉरेन कंपनीज के लिए अट्रैक्टिव बना सकती है बट विथ लिमिट्स। आज इंटरेस्ट रेट 5% चल रहा है तो कल जाकर 6% या 7% हो सकता है, लेकिन अचानक से 25% नहीं हो सकता। देश का दिवालिया निकल जाएगा। रुपी की डिमांड बढ़ाने का काम सरकार का है। आज भारत की कंपनीज छोड़िए, कितनी सारी इंडियन कंपनीज भारत छोड़कर दूसरे देशों में शिफ्ट हो रही हैं। भारत में बिजनेस करना टफ है, जिस पर हमने ऑन ग्राउंड डॉक्यूमेंट्री में बात भी की है। सरकार को मेक इन इंडिया पर वापस फोकस करने की जरूरत है ताकि कंपनीज भारत में जॉब्स जनरेट करें। जब एफडीआई बढ़ेगी तो रुपी की वैल्यू बढ़ेगी। नंबर 2, पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप। एक जमाना था जब भारत एक सोने की चिड़िया कहलाता था। दुनिया का 25% जीडीपी भारत का हुआ करता था। हमारे हैंडलूम्स, हमारे स्पाइसेस, हमारे प्रोडक्ट्स की दुनिया भर में डिमांड थी। लेकिन ये बातें अब इतनी पुरानी हो चुकी है कि ये झूठी लगती हैं। चाइना ने ट्रेड पर फोकस किया, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पर फोकस किया और इसीलिए आज चाइना एक सुपर पावर बनने की कगार पर है। हम चाइना नहीं है, हम भारत है। तो हमें
Yeah, sorry for that. So like the problem is I think China spends 4.5 no, we spend 4.6% of our GDP on education, while China spends a lot more than us. I think they spend close to 22% at one point in their like history. But the problem with that is if you look at India right now, is we have a lot of people who are graduates because people have been told that, okay, you need to go to college in order to make something out of yourself and a college education is necessary. And if you look at the number of people in India who have degrees, it's more than 60% of the population that have degrees. But the problem with this is unless and until you have a business environment where these people can take their knowledge and start their own companies, and entrepreneurship is something, when entrepreneurship is not promoted, or the fact that it's not being made easier for you to manufacture within India, things will not change. Is you might have an educated an educated population, but all that this will be good for is again the service industry. If unless and until the government is not focusing on industrialization, uh, even if the people are educated, things will not really mean anything. And to be more honest, in order to have like an industrialized economy, what you need is you need to educate people in trade jobs. You need to educate people in running machinery, and that is what most education should be focused on. And only then can you move towards education where people can do MBAs, people can actually like do a lot more like courses that are suited for a service-based economy. So even if we increase education, unless and until there is a place for these educated people to go and work, it's not going to like help out a lot. What really needs to happen is the creation of an environment where business and fundamentally a manufacturing is given importance. And a lot of people say that, okay, this is happening where the government is like encouraging SMEs, they're encouraging small manufacturing enterprises, but you can't just like be like, okay, they're going to make papad, yeah, they're going to make agarbatti, and this is going to like, in the end increase the country's GDP, or like convert India into a global like industrialist manufacturing center. We need to do what basically China did, and in the sense that we need to bring out a system where you are going to have a lot of people in the country working on manufacturing goods, and manufacturing goods that are specifically going to be exported. And India does have an opportunity to do that. Like, you have a rising middle class in Africa, where like people are increasing their expenditure, people want more goods, and India can export to Australia, because Africa, because that's what China did, right? China found that there is a market in India, and they started manufacturing goods for India. And as, like, let's say the consumer market within India matured, so did their manufacturing and their processes for manufacturing. And as the demand for goods, demand for cheap goods within India increased, so did their profits. So that's what India needs to do, is India needs to first capitalize on the fact that they can have an industrial society within India, and then second, export to Africa. Exporting to Africa is such a brilliant idea that you can actually focus on, but that's not really happening. Like, unless, if you just look at it, like, only a few Indian bikes are actually exported to Africa and like sold in the African markets. Other than that, again, a lot of like the middle class families that are upcoming in Africa actually buy products that are again manufactured in China.
आइडेंटिफाई करना होगा कि ऐसी कौन सी इंडियन बातें हैं जिनकी दुनिया भर में डिमांड है लेकिन हम उन्हें सप्लाई नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल मैंगोज। इंडिया को थाईलैंड जैसे देश भी मैंगो एक्सपोर्ट्स में मात दे रहे हैं। अल्फांसो मैंगोज तो फलों का राजा है, लेकिन हम दुनिया भर में उसे मार्केट नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। कुछ दिनों पहले एक एड देखी थी कि अमेरिका अपने पिस्तास को प्रमोट करने के लिए जसप्रीत बुमराह को ब्रांड एम्बेसडर के तौर पर ले रहा है। इसे मार्केटिंग कहते हैं, ब्रांड बिल्डिंग कहते हैं, जिसकी हेल्प से अमेरिकन गवर्नमेंट और अमेरिकन बिजनेसेस साथ आकर इंडिया में पिस्तास, अमेरिकन पिस्तास को प्रमोट कर रहे हैं। ये पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप के बगैर इम्पॉसिबल है। नंबर 3 इज टूरिज्म। क्या नहीं है हमारे
Again, like, why is it impossible without public private partnership? That's because like there is so much corruption within the government. Is anywhere you go, any kind of let's say license that you want, like that, the license Raj did not end with the British in India. Like, it's still ongoing. It doesn't matter which party is in power, the license Raj will always exist in India. Is you want to do anything, this is the, and to be honest, like, it's not even like, that you need to go to a person and then ask how much this is going to cost. There is always like, there is a set rate, and if you want this license, it costs you this much. This much is bribe, this much is like the cost that needs to be paid to every single officer. It's all set in stone. Like, okay, there is a rate, there is a menu, and that's what you need to do. And so that's why you don't necessarily see development happening in the country, is because there is so much corruption that and that corruption has like penetrated itself on every single level of the government. It's not just, okay, the ministers are corrupt. No, like, the bureaucrats are corrupt, the assistants of the bureaucrats are corrupt, the secretaries are corrupt. And when everyone is corrupt, like, it's very difficult to have any sort of functioning business, because then foreign companies, they'll be like, okay, instead of paying, let's say, bribes in India, we will actually go and set up this manufacturing plant in another country, like Vietnam for that matter.
हमारे देश में हिमाचल के माउंटेन्स हैं, मेघालय के वाटरफॉल्स है, राजस्थान के डेजर्ट्स हैं और केरला में फॉरेस्ट भी हैं। लेकिन सुनकर शर्म आएगी कि दुबई एक शहर है और भारत एक देश। लेकिन दुबई में 16 मिलियन टूरिस्ट आता है और भारत में सिर्फ 10 मिलियन। दैट्स इट। और इसका इम्पैक्ट हमारे होटल्स पर, हमारे बिजनेसेस पर, हमारी इकोनॉमी पर होता है। ये देश हमारा है। अगर हमें सुपर पावर बनना है तो हमारी इकोनॉमी के हर प्रॉब्लम को सुलझाना होगा। टूरिज्म को बूस्ट करने के लिए सरकार को क्या करना चाहिए, इसके लिए हमने एक डेडिकेटेड वीडियो बनाया। लेकिन
See, like, yes, sure, tourism is one way where you can get in business, like, get in a lot of people to come with like dollars and spend it in your country, and that's going to boost. But like, is once you like actually have traveled around the country, you kind of realize this, is like every single tourist destination is filled with scammers. And I'm being honest, man, I have traveled quite a lot. Like, for example, like when I went to Rajasthan, is from every single auto driver to like every single person who's there doing giving cab services, even Goa for that matter. Goa was in the news for like a long time now because of the amount of red tape that was like going on, like see the corruption that was going on within the whole cab drivers association, and how that is actually driving down tourism. Is the value and the so the value for a service is extremely high in India, but the quality is not necessarily there. You can get cheaper like stays in five-star hotels in Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, while if you even by paying the like same amount in India, you basically don't get anything. You'll get an Oyo for that matter. So the quality and like the value doesn't really match in India. So that's the problem, where even people within India are now choosing to go abroad India to like vacation rather than actually spending money within India.
लेकिन एज अ सिटीजन हमें अपने विदेश में रहने वाले इंडियन दोस्तों को वापस इंडिया बुलाना होगा, अगर परमानेंटली नहीं तो घूमने के लिए ही सही। देश की एनआरआई कम्युनिटी देश की वो ताकत है जो डॉलर्स को भारत में ला सकती है। अगर आप इस वीडियो को एंड तक देख रहे हैं तो प्लीज इसे अपने एनआरआई दोस्तों के साथ शेयर कीजिए। चलिए उनको इस
Depending on NRIs to boost the economy is kind of foolhardy. Again, yeah, sure, they have a lot of access to dollars, but then that's not how you grow a country's economy. How you grow a country's economy is by boosting fundamentals, and the fundamental is that we need to increase exports than like imports, and that is what we need to focus on as a country in order to grow the country for that matter. And the whole dollar versus rupee thing is kind of indicative of that, is the fact that we are exporting much less than we are importing, and that's the main problem. And then unless and until we do that, like tourism or like bringing NRIs back, that all that is really irrelevant to the whole problem. I mean, there's one video, since we were talking about climate and then renewables and like non-renewables. There's actually a really good TED talk on renewables and their effect and how it is not really like that sustainable.
आयुषी
Thank you very much. When I was a boy, my parents would sometimes take me camping in California. We would camp in the beaches, in the forests, in the deserts. Some people think the deserts are empty of life, but my parents taught me to see the wildlife all around us. The hawks, the eagles, the tortoises. One time when we were setting up camp, we found a baby scorpion with its stinger out. And I remember thinking how cool it was that something could be both so cute and also so dangerous. After college, I moved to California and I started working on a number of environmental campaigns. I got involved in helping to save the state's last ancient redwood forest and blocking a proposed radioactive waste repository set for the desert. Shortly after I turned 30, I decided I wanted to dedicate a significant amount of my life to solving climate change. I was worried that global warming would end up destroying many of the natural environments that people had worked so hard to protect. I thought the technical solutions were pretty straightforward. Solar panels on every roof, electric car in the driveway, that the main obstacles were political. And so I helped to organize a coalition of the country's biggest labor unions and biggest environmental groups. Our proposal was for a $300 billion investment in renewables. And the idea was not only would we prevent climate change, but we would also create millions of new jobs in a very fast-growing high-tech sector. Our efforts really paid off in 2007, when then presidential candidate Barack Obama embraced our vision. And between 2009 and 2015, the US invested $150 billion in renewables and other kinds of.
So you see, this is the main reason why renewables are pushed a lot on people, is that a lot of politicians and a lot of NGOs and a lot of these people are pushing for renewables because they're all invested within renewables. And it doesn't matter whether it's sustainability or not. A lot of these green NGO groups will always push like the idea of sustainables. And the problem with sustainables, as he explains in this planet, in this video, is on the planet, and then as he explains in this video, is kind of very telling. But again, you need to understand why it's being pushed so much when we actually have solutions which are much better, like solutions that are much more suited to actually solve the problems. But people are not ready to look into it because of the amount of investments that the people have in new energy, and new energy is basically based on renewables. And that's why, nuclear is not given like that much of an opportunity, or why people don't even want to look at nuclear, and renewables are like everything that's being invested in. And that's mainly why, like, renewables are being pushed down the throats of people.
Clean tech. But right away, we started to encounter some problems. So first of all, the electricity from solar rooftops ends up costing about twice as much as the electricity from solar farms. And both solar farms and wind farms require covering a pretty significant amount of land with solar panels and wind turbines, and also building very big transmission lines to bring all that electricity from the countryside into the city. Both of those things were often very strongly resisted by local communities, as well as by conservation biologists who were concerned about the impacts
I was once
on
working
wild bird species.
with an environmental activist, and I was working with an environmental activist in Karnataka, and he was working on the Pavgad solar farm, a case against the Pavgad solar farm, which is one of the biggest one of the biggest solar farms in India. And the main case was based on how people within the community are interacting with the Pavgad solar farm. And the main question was, is how much, like, let's say, corruption is being enabled by setting up these solar farms, for that matter. Because solar farms, according to the Indian like schemes and subsidy schemes, solar farms allows an industry to convert agricultural land into industrial land. This is the main draw for like industries in order to like establish these solar farms. And that is why solar farms became a huge trend, is that people wanted to invest in solar farms because that allows them to convert agricultural land that they've acquired into industrial land using the solar farms like playbook. And most of the solar farms that we, even if we look at it right now, a lot of solar farms were established like 5 years back, and then a lot of these solar farms are now not really solar farms, but have been are on the land market being sold as industrial land, because what necessarily these solar farms allowed them was to allow the sale of these lands as industrial lands instead of agricultural land.
And other animals. Now, there was a lot of other people working on technical solutions at the time. One of the big challenges, of course, is just the intermittency of solar and wind. They only generate electricity about 10 to 30% of the time during most of the year. But some of the solutions that were being proposed were to convert hydroelectric dams into gigantic batteries. The idea was that when the sun was shining and the wind was blowing, you would pump the water uphill, store it for later, and then when you needed electricity, run it over the turbines. In terms of wildlife, some of these problems just didn't seem like a significant concern. So when I learned that house cats kill billions of birds every year, it put into perspective the hundreds of thousands of birds rather that are killed by wind turbines. It basically seemed to me at the time that most, if not all, of the problems of scaling up solar and wind could be solved through more technological innovation. But as the years went by, these problems persisted and in many cases grew worse. So California is a state that's really committed to renewable energy, but we still haven't converted many of our hydroelectric dams into big batteries. Some of the problems are just geographic. It's just, you have to have...
Okay, I can't play this video. I just got a thingy like, yeah. Do you guys have any other questions about me? And then let's continue this. Ask me anything. And yeah, like you can ask me anything, and then I will try to like answer your questions. because now we are hitting the 1 hour 30 minutes of this live stream. And I would say I would again like to thank everyone for joining the live stream. I would also like to thank. Sure, like I will actually start memberships on the channel, and I will also add my socials on um, on the channel profile. So, are we in a recession? So yeah, I will add all my socials on the channel profile, so you can connect on LinkedIn then. And yeah, the next question we have is: are we in a recession? We are very much in a recession, and then if you look at it, like the global economy itself has been in a recession since the last year. They actually changed the definition of what a recession is on Wikipedia in order for them to not accept that we are in a recession, and that ended up happening. So yes, like the definition of recessions have been changed, but since the global economy has not been growing and has basically stagnated, and the fact that middlemen are the ones who are actually making money, with most of the global economy now being price gouged, with a lot of people not having jobs. The first start for this recession itself, the indication for this recession itself was the fact that jobs are not being created enough. So since these jobs are not being created enough now, um, that was the first indication of the recession. And now a lot of people in the US are also losing jobs. Like the most recent jobs terms report came up, and then the CPI inflation index also came out, and all of these are actually raising alarm bells in like the people's minds. But people are now are expecting Donald Trump's terms, and they want to see what Donald Trump does. And based on that, we can like, and how the market reacts to that, and based on what happens, I think people will readily accept or not accept that we are in a recession or not. And this situation that we are in right now is very similar to the situations before World War I and before like the Great Depression actually happened. So I'll, a lot of people are also talking about how, we might now see another major conflict emerging within the world, and economic indications like this are a very important and fundamental factor towards deciding how these recessions, how these wars between countries are also coming up. So yes, like we might very soon like see announcements that we are in a recession. And yeah, the EU also is facing a lot of issues. The European Union has been in this, let's say, in this period where they have had very little growth or no growth. Britain itself, I think, the last two GDP like the last two GDP measurements within Britain also showed that they have negative growth in GDP. So Britain, the UK is also in recession. So it's, all of these countries are necessarily having a lot of economic issues, but the main problem is that the political leadership or the political class within these countries do not want to accept whether there is a recession or there is not a recession happening. So that's the main problem with the whole like topic of recession itself. Is the people are facing issues. People are like facing insane levels of inflation, but the political class within countries are not ready to accept that there is a recession happening, or that there is economic problems. And that's one of the main reason Donald Trump was even elected, is the fact that Donald Trump talked about all of these issues, and he wanted to, like, let's say, highlight all of these things, and that's why Donald Trump won. And then if we look at other parties in Europe also right now, that's what they're doing. The AfD within Germany, then you also have like newcomers within a lot of different countries, like Millet winning for that matter, is a lot of these like new challenges to the political class, the established political class, are winning because they are accepting the people's like views, and then they're supporting the people in accepting that yes, there is an economic recession happening, and then we need to get over it. But most of the political class does not want to accept this, or nor do they want things to change. And that's the main problem with, like, understanding whether we are in a recession or not. If we don't have any other questions, then I will end the stream. thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for the 5K subs. It was amazing, and I will continue to make videos, and then I hope I keep getting the amount of support that you guys have shown me, and then I hope the channel keeps growing. Thank you so much.